Hello. We should have folks streaming in at the moment, but we're going to get started. There's a little bit of housekeeping, getting going in the beginning, and we'll jump right in. So get settled wherever you are, get going in GoToWebinar, and we will start. My name is John Cutler. I'm the moderator for today. Our panel is What is ProductOps? Paths and Perspectives. And this is presented by ProductStack. So ProductStack is a grouping of some companies interested in practical solutions for modern product teams. There is a Slack community. There's also, a site that you can check out, theproductstack.com, and it includes folks from JAMA, Pivotal Tracker, Product Plan, and Amplitude. So big thanks to them. I just love showing up at these things, and so the companies make it possible and also make sure that you show up. So I'm very grateful for the companies to set that up. The webinar today, What is Products, Paths, and Perspectives, we realized that we couldn't really fit this all into one webinar. So what we conceived of is 3 webinars that are all independently valuable, that you could just take one and still get value out of. But if you wanted to string together these 3 webinars, you could get perhaps even more value. So today we're kind of going broad with paths and perspectives. The second is a deep dive with Pivotal at the role of ProductOps. So we thought that after going broad, it would be useful to go deep with one particular team and see how they're solving these particular challenges. And then on November 19th, I'll actually return as a moderator about how to get started with this. And I think the dates are fixed, but we will send an email to everyone after this particular panel discussion with specific sign-up links and dates. This is funny because my prompt is I'm actually nudging. Andre from Product Plan is right here, so I'm nudging his leg. So it seems like it's totally safe for work here. Okay, good. He's here. That's okay. So a brief overview for today. I'm going to actually let the panel introduce themselves. We're extremely excited to have Buki, Megan, Keith, and Aloka here. Then I'm going to do a brief overview to get us warmed up. We'll jump into the panel discussion, cover kind of questions like why now, what are you doing about it today, some common themes around scaling. We hear this phrase, the glue, a lot, so we'll get into that. And then maybe some practical advice and next steps for the audience. And then we'll follow that up with some live Q&A. We also got 150 questions submitted by folks from the attendees. That was incredible. We've tried to pick some key ones out, but I would also encourage people, if something we say inspires a question, you can submit questions in real time during the panel. And Andre, who's next to me, will curate those questions and bring those up. So you can ask questions during the panel. Thank you to everyone who asked questions beforehand, and then we'll try to leave some time for Q&A. So with that, I guess I'm first on the list. I'll do a very brief introduction. My name is John Cutler. I'm a product evangelist at Amplitude. Amplitude makes product intelligence software for teams to help them build better products. Specifically, my role is external coach. I do a little bit of internal coaching, but mostly I meet with hundreds of product teams everywhere in the world, really, not just customers, but prospects, and then people who have even no interest in buying our product whatsoever. I meet with them and learn about how they're working and then offer some help when I can. My particular interest in this is it started with hearing from a lot of the people I was talking with were asking me questions about ProductOps. I got a specific view into this because a lot of our customers, the ProductOps role is interested in analytics and helping teams get data to inform decisions. But as I became more aware of the whole general umbrella of ProductOps, I learned that there are many other variations of this. So I'm just learning here just like anyone and speaking with some great folks from some other companies. Megan.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm Megan Gleason. I'm a director of product at Auth0. I lead a team of product managers covering 2 of our product domains, so most focused on developer experience and service management, so all the things about our customers' interaction with Auth0 and how to make that super facile. Prior to joining Auth0 last year, I was director of product at Chef, so I have a keen interest in technical products or products built for technical audiences. And I was excited about this panel because my first job in a product organization was, my title was Product Operations Lead. So I don't know if it meant the same thing to me at that time as it means to others now, but that's part of what we might learn today.
Keith.
Great. My name is Keith Nottinson. I'm the Senior Director of Development at Optimizely, where I lead the technical program management and the QA teams. Prior to this, I was the Director of Product Operations at Yahoo, where I worked with 60 or 70 product people, as well as a whole organization of 100 people, which includes 60 or 70 engineering teams.
That's some scale there. Yeah, we got some scale going, which is good. Buki.
Hey, yeah, so I'm currently a senior product manager at Microsoft, where I'm sort of working within the developer services org to help product teams develop a centralized way of doing product. Prior to this, mostly been a product manager at different startups, so this is sort of my first big company and managing all of this stuff at scale.
And Aloka.
Hi, I'm Aloka. I'm a director of product at Pivotal out of Denver, and my primary responsibility is supporting the product teams that we have out of Denver that are working towards building products for our Pivotal platform product. And my introduction to product ops was actually being invited to join this panel. And I was like, what is product ops? And then I started digging into it and realized that I was doing a bunch of things that related to product ops. So I'm discovering myself that I am doing part of what we do, what we're talking about for product ops.
Great. Okay. So the way that this works is we actually have these polls. You can access the poll. You'll see the interface to access the poll. So the first question is, do you have a person on staff with product operations in their title? This will help us kind of mold the conversation as we move forward. And we sort of wait until a certain percentage of people on the call have answered. And then Andre usually, pokes me when we're ready to move on. So this is when we do the Jeopardy. That's Andre. Did you have Jeopardy in Germany when you were there?
Yes.
All right, the German Jeopardy. Okay, so yes at 18%. No, but we're considering creating that role in the next 12 months. That's 18%. No, and we have no plans to hire in the next 12 months. We're curious, it's 53%. And I don't know is 12%. That's super useful for us. I think it's actually almost representative of the panel. So we're in a similar boat here, and so this will be fun. Okay, so what I'm going to do to kick this off, very briefly for a minute or two, the joke I had with this is I received an email from my friend Richard at Envision, and he was introducing me to someone, and he said, you should talk to John because he's an expert in product ops. And full admission at that point, I was sort of furiously, I'd heard of this thing out there, but I was like, well, why is Richard saying that? And then similar to Aloka, I realized, well, yeah, actually, this is a large gist of my work for one particular thing. But what I wanted to do is to step back. Like I said, in Amplitude, we hear from a certain sliver of people often trying to, enable large scale teams, think about insights and get insights to people. But I took a broader look and at job descriptions and how people describe their role. And I've done about 40 interviews now with product ops folks too in the lead up to this. So one thing that you notice, I grouped some of the words, the common keywords that you start to see when you talk to folks about this, and you start to see words like synthesize and communicate and integrate and oversee or intermediate, analyze, make consistent. So these are, the interesting part with that is these are words that are commonly seen related to operational type roles, right? So this comes in a long tradition of operational roles. And I would say, knowing what I know about DevOps, for example, DevOps is a very sort of strong cultural thing. There's a lot of culture and background in DevOps. I think this does trend it a little bit more product ops to an operational type role in the tradition of other operational type roles. And the way that these words manifest, though, across many different descriptions is a massive range, ranging from one that I really liked, manage the product development system as a product. You could tell a product manager wrote that, right? I want to make sure that everything was product oriented. A lot of discussions of acting as an intermediary, but intermediary of between whom? Is it frontline support and engineering? Is it product and other stakeholders? There's no one clear definition, even though people are trying to define it. There's a lot of intermediary type roles. A lot of descriptions of connective tissues, right? Connective tissue between product and engineering, user-facing teams, connective tissue between teams and the broader customer base. There is a trend for some companies, I think, especially in B2C, this idea that, you know, once a product is launched, it somehow becomes operationalized while teams move on to other things. So there's the kind of nuts and bolts of what that means to have a product out in the market. That was pretty interesting. And then there's a whole series of roles around sharing best practices, shared language. How do we do products? So suffice to say, on the left, all your operational oriented words, synthesis, and really, if you think on a high level, this balance between centralization and consistency, right? Operations provides some advantages there, and then many different manifestations of those words. So that was interesting. I'll end on one quick thing before we go into the panel discussion. I did find some things that were a little worrisome, so I just wanted to air these elephants and get the elephants out of the room. It seemed like in some of my qualitative interviews with people, it was more about being product manager led than product led. So it was very, very focused on, you know, product management team and how to make them amazing, not necessarily bubbling to other roles. That was worrisome to me. So this is bias. This is worrisome to me, maybe not be to other folks, but these are some things. I found a lot of examples of sort of efficiency over efficacy. So just getting the feature factory rolling ever more efficiently. This has some problems associated with it. Certain environments where this was actually separating frontline teams from customers and users. So that your designers and developers on the frontline teams are actually doing less interaction with customers. And that's a little bit worrisome to me. And then kind of your sort of scaling issues. Examples of where instead of people scaling what works, they were taking a very scaled up system and then trying to fix it with operational things. That was another pattern. So anyway, suffice to say, another big one was the tool owners. And this has happened a lot with sales ops and marketing ops where you see people say, well, we just own all the tools. We own Marketo, we own these things. And that's an interesting angle to this, but I think that there's a little bit more to it. You know, when teams just owned the tools, they often had a pretty narrow view of what was happening. So anyway, so those are some worrisome findings. We might get into some of these topics later on. If someone was to ask me who's doing this the best in the world, not that I'm necessarily one to fully judge on this, is that it was often environments where people were organically creating these roles as companies were scaling in a healthy way and picking things that were good candidates to be operationalized that were in the DNA of the company, and then figuring out that really nice balance between specialization and where that could be effective, not just efficient. So I saw lots of patterns of that. So in the last 2 years, we've heard about ProductOps from Stripe and Uber. There's been some big names where you hear about that. When in my research, a lot of those were environments where it kind of grew organically. So I think that was the one pattern I've seen, but we're going to jump to the panel discussion and hear from our panelists. So today, our focus is on the challenge for these particular companies. To start it off, my first question, we had a good pre-panel meeting on this and we were having a lot of fun with it, is what changes, either social, competitive, technical, are contributing to us talking about this right now? From my research, these rules have been around for a really long time, but for some reason, we're talking about it right now. And so I was wanting to get the panelists' thoughts on why now. And maybe we could start with Aloka.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we had a pre-panel talk, and as I was listening to everyone talk about what they thought the evolution was, the big aha moment I had, and I think Buki triggered that, was this evolution from going to a centralized command control type product building organization to a more decentralized organization where we push authority to information and try to have our teams at the grassroots level be able to make decisions for themselves and move forward and not wait for directive information from leadership. And I think what that's resulted in is the teams themselves have a lot more responsibility to, one, make sure that they are moving in a common direction that's set by the organization, but also trying to understand what that means for their specific team and being able to build confidence on what they should be doing and where they should be investing as a team. And the additional overhead in my mind that comes with that is doing a ton of research, building insights, not just based off of research that comes out of their team, but across the organization. And so now it's just a fire hose of information and insights that different teams are coming up with. And how do you organize and build confidence that you have enough information to build a roadmap that makes sense for your team, that aligns not just with the organizational direction, but what you're hearing other teams are learning as well.
One logistical note here is that in GoToWebinar, you'll see a horizontal slider. We're not going to be using the slides now, so you can slide down that slider to get your Brady Bunch view, which could be a little bit easier for folks. Thank you so much, Aloka. Keith, you've seen this happen. You were involved in this massive organization. Now you're at Optimizely. You've seen a lot of changes over your particular career. What's the movement now? What changes are actually occurring?
Well, I think more and more is expected of the product managers and a lot more externally. So the skill sets they have now might be different than they used to be, where they used to be maybe more project managing or more like, say, product owners are in the weeds with the teams every day. Right now, a lot of our people have to travel around, meet with customers, a lot more customer development. So this creates like a space where you probably need someone to help connect the teams closer to the customer because there's some space. I think that's why you might have a lot of these organic cases, because basically space is created and some people internally fill the role. So both times I became a product operator, for lack of a better term, I was internal and I was just filling in gaps basically because I was approaching it from the program management and the engineering side of the house.
Cool, interesting. Megan.
Yeah, I think what Aloka and Keith said resonates with me. I think like for us working with enterprise customers, there's a concern about introducing fatigue with customers, right? So as we have a number of product managers who are working in different areas, we want to make sure that they're getting access to those customers, but in a way that doesn't, result in pain or exhaustion on behalf of the customers. So it's the same motivations are driving that, sort of that customer development motion that product managers are embracing, the empowered team model rather than the sort of directed, feature team model requires that access to customers. But we want to do it in a way that customers feel, heard but not overly taxed. And then the other thing I think is for what I'm seeing is sort of an expectation again among those customers of a level of consistency and professionalism from their vendors. I think the game is like it just keeps going up in terms of what those customers, especially enterprise customers, expect from their vendors.
I was thinking for when I was going to ask Buki this, that really Microsoft is really known for actually being in the kind of center of its own transition. So you could speak more broadly to the broader surroundings or even necessarily what you see in sort of Microsoft's transformation almost over the last couple of years. What are you seeing, Buki?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting that you talk about Microsoft's transition, like being with the transition from Steve Ballmer to Satya, the current CEO. It's been more like, oh, we're customer obsessed. We're going to be talking to our customers all the time. And the folks who are, who've been here for their entire careers are like, wait, I've never talked to a customer before. Or like, I don't know, like the PMs who've been here for that long. They're like, I was always relying on a researcher to do the research and then hand it off to me. And so there's this big gap because it's like 140,000 people. to get everybody the kinds of skills and the kinds of know-hows that they need to actually be able to have meaningful conversations with customers, be able to drive their own product roadmaps, and not wait for the CVP to tell them what to do next. And so it's sort of both a how do we do this from an operations standpoint, and also how do we do this from a cultural standpoint and get people that sense of agency as well.
Wow. All right, we've got some great perspectives. I think, wondering if I have anything to add. I think, talking to a couple hundred teams in the last year, the number of product leaders who come to me who are sort of generally aware that they're supposed to be pushing autonomy down to the teams, generally aware, but not specifically aware of how that works. I mean, it's actually a lot easier to command and control something than it is to promote aligned autonomy. So that comes up in a lot of these conversations, is product leaders desperately thinking. And I think the natural outgrowth of that is that people then realize there's only so many hours in the day. You're managing up, managing across, managing to the side, managing down diagonal, managing down, and you're trying to pull these reports, and you're trying to collaborate with other people in the organizations. To be a true sort of servant leader in that context takes a lot of energy and a lot of attention, and there's only so many hours in the day. And I think that that's one theme that I've seen. I'm interested to talk specifically about your organizations, as much as you can talk about your organizations, and specific signals or challenges, or what your focus is on right now that matches these general umbrellas of product ops. I'm not even sure, there's a lot of people on the call who want to be doing these things but won't even necessarily assume that title, but these challenges resonate. So I was wondering, for example, Keith, I'd like your perspective, because you come at it a little bit from the developer standpoint at Optimizely, but what specifically, what are you gluing together, for example, at Optimizely?
Well, it started with when all the development teams started doing Scrum several years back. So it was really focused on the build. But then over time, we've expanded our end-to-end customer service, basically all the way to the customer request to all the way to delivering the product. So it was over time, it wasn't just about building, it was building and testing and deploying. It was about enabling our customers. So it's finding out what they want in customer development. So it was about enlarging basically the pipe that we were doing, going towards the customer on both ends.
Yeah, so to be even, when you say both ends, what specifically do you mean there? Like, what's on the right-hand side? We all know what the left side is, which is some crazy backlog or roadmap or all these inputs. But what does the right side look like, especially related to Optimizely, and your product in general is also experimentation. And I love your Kanban board. You have these little magnets that look like beakers, and all the items on the right have little beakers on them. So what does the right side look like?
Well, just the inputs go all the way to any customer request, any strategy we want, hack week project. So any idea can come in, and then it goes through this discovery phase to the development phase. On the right side, it's about when we get to our first customer, then bringing that fully to market so all the customers can have it. And a lot of that is helping enablement, go-to-market enablement, delivering these products. But it's also, once we deploy that, running experiments so people will start using it more. So it's really about getting our customers to understand it and use it more and more.
I was thinking, Megan, when we were speaking about before, you were mentioning some challenge around life cycle, but one thought that came to me is that I think in a lot of companies, they're building way faster than they can effectively integrate what they're building out to these sort of demanding customers. I didn't know how that impacted the life cycle role that you have, or what your particular product ops challenge was.
Yeah. Right. So the role that we've created in our team is called Product Lifecycle Manager, and that is an operational type role. That the key focuses then are sort of things coming in at the start of the life cycle, so new capabilities that are in early access and beta, or even things we're just doing research or discovery on, like ideas that we need more signal on. And then the tail end of the life cycle, managing deprecations in a way that is graceful and minimizes disruption to customers. And a key thing on both of those is sort of that element of consistency, that we want any customer who participates in our product life cycle to feel valued, heard, understand expectations that they should have in regards to engagement from Auth0, that sort of thing. But the exciting part to me is sort of that front end. So we've been developing or creating a customer development program, which we're launching like this week, I think.
Good luck.
Thank you. But to have more formality around, what do we expect from customers who are going to participate in our product lifecycle? What does it mean for them to be a part of shaping the product? But also, what are the benefits that they get? So I think those are, for us, have been the key things. We also have challenges around access to data. Our product managers are doing more ad hoc data analysis than we'd like. And so we're looking to create another sort of operational role in the team, which is a product data analyst, who'll just be dedicated to that function to support product managers. And both of these get into sort of the, what are the tasks that we can offload from product managers who have this very large list of responsibilities to help them go faster and spend more time working directly with customers and getting great products out the door.
Interesting. Buki, what are you thinking in terms of Microsoft? What is the specific challenge on your plate in your world, day in, day out?
Right now it's I think there are a couple of things. On the one side of it, I think is getting folks to really understand what it means to talk to customers, what it means to actually get out of the building, get out of the number. In Microsoft, all the buildings are numbered, so all the numbered buildings into the real world.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very strange, but and to actually start to not rely on surveys, not rely on telemetry, but actually rely on real users' experiences, and getting people comfortable with that when there's a lot of cultural reasons why they might not want to do that, especially because historically they've been asked not to do that. So figuring out, okay, how do we get people to do better user interviews and that kind of stuff is one side of the challenge. And then the other side of the challenge is also getting leaders to some degree, let go of the command and control kind of way of leading, right? And be more comfortable with this idea that folks are going to go out into the world and come up with insights that they might not have known before. And both of those are sort of different and challenging in very different ways. But yeah, those are the couple of things that we're facing right now.
Can you think of you mentioned this challenge of getting someone to step back from a command and control way, and that's obviously extremely difficult for both parties to do that. Could you describe what a bright spot look like? How have you hacked things to get that people to let go just a little bit to open that up?
I mean, I think some of it has been having folks go out into the world, talk to users, and come back with real meaningful user insights and quotes and be like, hey, you said this thing, we should go do it. But here's some evidence that maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe our understanding of the customer is a little bit different than what you had originally thought. And starting to sort of give the individual PMs the tools that they need to make those arguments themselves. Is one example that I've done. I mean, personally, I think it's been really interesting because your first insight around managing product processes as a product feels very aligned with the way I've been sort of going about this. And so actually doing the same thing myself and going out and talking to ICPMs and figuring out, oh, what are the needs? And coming back to the director of product and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't roll out trainings to everybody as a way to do this because it's clear that that's not actually a need right now. That's been a pretty big bright spot in getting people more comfortable in that way of working.
Great. I'm for the next question, I want to ask Aloka this, but I always think of Pivotal having a pivotal way. And so when something's changing or something's emerging, I'm always curious about how Pivotal rolls with it. And so, yeah, what's the pivotal challenge that you're looking at right now that smacks of this ProductOps stuff?
Yeah, before I jump into that answer, one of the other patterns I've heard even so far is this idea of customer obsession, and that's also new for us, right? Before it was very much don't talk to customers, we're going to tell you what to do, just go build the thing we're asking you to build. And now we are all the phrase around customer obsession, outcome oriented is something that we use at Pivotal, and get out of the building, which is very much about customer development, right? So going back to where is ProductOps coming from? I think part of it is also this, we're telling everyone that they should be obsessed about what their customers want and talk to their customers. And we don't really have that toolkit, it's an evolving toolkit. And then like diving into your question, one of the challenges we are facing is around as a scaled organization. And at this point, we are around 80 teams within our product org. And everyone's talking to customers, everyone's talking within the thing that they're trying to learn from the same set of customers. So the challenges we face, one is definitely what Megan mentioned. How do we make sure that customers are not getting fatigued by having all these teams reach out to them, and making sure that we are showing up in the most professional way, and we're improving the relationship versus making the relationship worse with customers, because we are B2B and we have 300 customers. So this is a relationship business. It's not transactional as it relates to customer interviews. The second challenge is all that information is now in the ethos in different Google Drives for team drives. And it's incredibly hard for us to bring that information together. And one of the things that I've personally been thinking about recently is, what does it look like for us to really pull that research together and provide overarching insights that would be valuable for teams and also for leadership? Because there seems to be a middle layer missing. There's the insights at the team level, and there's also insights at the leadership level, because they're talking to CEOs, CIOs, and there's a ton of information coming from them. And there's this middle layer of like, how do you tie in what you're hearing at the leadership level and what you're hearing at the team level to create that mid-level strategy? That's been a challenge that we at Pivotal have been working really hard at more recently. And something we're experimenting with now, which is something other organizations have done, is having programs and having that middle layer of, we have a program for around Pivotal Application Service, which is one of our products, or observability as it relates to providing observability and metrics, and driving strategy at that level that collates the information coming from all the directions.
It's interesting. In a lot of the coaching that I do, I've just dubbed it the messy middle. There's something in the kind of 1 to 3 quarter range that's problematic in a lot of these companies. 1 to 3 years, it's easy to put on a PowerPoint slide and say, this is our strategy. And as Keith knows, it's funny, Keith has this big visual board, but the stuff the teams are actually typing on is just one part of that board. There's just tons of work and planning and progress and stuff at the same time. But it's often that the 1 to 3 week work and 1 to 3 month work is stuff that people are doing, so it's in their mind. But there's this connective tissue between that 1 to 3 sort of quarter length work and the 1 to 3 year sort of vision thing. And so when the 1 to 3 year stuff is things the CIO that will tell your CEO, and they'll sock away, and so there's that connective tissue that's very, very difficult. And that comes up again and again. We've got a lot of questions coming in, like a crazy number. So I wanted to make sure we even get to some really, like, we could do a rapid fire round now that we're getting warmed up. And one is, what is the difference between product management and product operations? And we could, like, lightning round. Aloka.
I think that product operations is stuff that is falling off the product manager's plate that they don't have to do. They don't have time to do, and a lot of the time that seems to be a lot of synthesizing, collecting data that is contextual to the product that they're building, but not directly related.
Yep. Keith, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I think of it as, they think of all the content, like they're thinking about the customer, they're talking to the customer. I just think about the form of how we're going to put all their content and like interact together. So I'm the exact opposite of a product manager.
Megan.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think yeah, it's similar to what Aloka said. The product operations tasks are, picking up some of what product managers are unable to get to on their very long laundry list of responsibilities, and also specializing in those areas where the customer or stakeholder will benefit from an experience that's more consistent and coherent than 12 or 80 product managers who are all doing things different ways.
Cool. Buki.
Yeah, I think that it is for me, it's a little bit of just like, how do we, I guess I think of the product managers as my customer more than anything else. And like, how do I build stuff that like helps them do their jobs better and more effectively?
Yeah, I probably resonate most with that. Maybe it's a little bit like that first bullet, sort of the product of the product development system. And in that sense too, to me, that also strikes it. Maybe it's apples and oranges. Maybe product ops are elements that a sort of a product leader, like a VP or someone who's thinking about how to create, synergies or connections across a whole group. You're taking some of the stuff off of their plate, but it's not off of their plate. They're actually figuring out how to amplify their abilities versus just offloading. I think that's the tool trap, right? Like if someone was like, well, we've got someone who just, the only person at Amplitude, we see this a lot, like, oh, there's only one person who knows how to use SQL. So a dangerous thing would be like, well, we just need a junior person to run SQL all the time. That would be a very tools oriented offloading. But what we see at least is a product leader saying, I see the bigger problem is data literacy at scale. And so we're going to have a data literacy as a service role. And whether they have a product ops or not in their title, it's sort of the leader thinking about how to make everyone more effective versus just offloading. So that's a little bit what I'm seeing. So cool. Keep the questions. Wow, there's just so many. I feel that oh, geez. Okay, I feel like we could get. Let's jump back into our discussion, and we'll jump back to another question. It does seem like we've mentioned the word scale a lot, and that seems to be this common thread here. And scaling is also a very loaded term. Anyone who's argued with engineers about scaling or other folks, it becomes pretty heated. And so I was wondering, how does scaling fit into all this, Buki? Oh, you guys are already big, so you could take that perspective as well. Like, how is scale versus scaling fitting into this particular challenge?
I mean, it's interesting that you say we're already big. I think it's funny. I'm always like, we don't know what works yet. Let's not scale anything yet. And that's always the challenge, because it's interesting, because I think that for us, we have the problems of scale because we are already big, but we don't necessarily have the solutions that work specifically for our org. And so it's really tempting to say, oh, well, we can just scale. We need it to work for everybody, so let's just scale something. And that's been I think that's sort of the tension point I have with scaling, because I think it's really tempting to scale prematurely, especially because we are so large.
Got it. So you've got like the reverse problem is how to nurture things in a scaled environment, which is a really interesting one. Megan, you guys are kind of growing real fast. You did hire a product leader recently, right? Is that?
We did. Our new CPO started 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
So the head of marketing doesn't need to like sit in anymore.
Right.
I'm sure he really liked that. It was probably fun for him. He learned a lot. Yeah. So you're in that. It's just blowing up. And so how does that impact your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think, as that sort of crazy growth took off last year, that's when we really recognized that we needed some of these operational roles in the team. And honestly, anybody who works with me knows I'm a purist, and I take regular trips back to my ivory tower. And so I'm always wary of sort of like diluting the focus of a product team away from the core mission of product management. However, like what I'm seeing is that at a certain point, and it's not just about the number of product managers on the team, but scale in terms of, the size of the bets you're making, the number of customers that you're trying to serve, and so on, also scale of the business. Operations, will help us, is already helping us to move faster, have more insights as a team, and so on, and reduce redundancy, right? But I do think like one of the chats we had last week was about sort of frameworks and flexibility, right? And there is, I see a racy and I freak out and I like flip the table and stuff. It's not my jam, but I do think that you want to.
There's an extra column for that person who's the person who's like saying no racy. It's racing, no racing.
Racing.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Sorry.
racing. But I do think that, you know, as your org gets bigger, as all of these, you know, sort of what's at stake gets bigger, you do want to have those frameworks that allow people not to have to reinvent the wheel every time, go faster in their ultimate pursuit of outcomes, but also provide them with space to be creative. And I think that's especially important in product development teams, inclusive of engineering and design and product managers. So for me, that's a big part of, like, when we talk about scaling and why it drives this, it's sort of that, like, how can product operations help support that framework, but allow for the creativity and innovation to still flourish.
Keith, you guys are kind of growing too. Your board eventually will not be big enough to visualize all the things. So,
Well, I'll try to avoid that. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's connecting the story big and small into one story and scaling it like out of just the engineering and design and product organization, but to the business, so they understand how we do software development without having to understand all the words we use and acronyms we use. So it's, and I feel a lot that I'm a product ambassador. So I'm an ambassador for the product engineering design orgs, and I'm typically the person brought in to help explain things in a simple way. Yeah, so that's how I typically deal with it. I also try to flatten management so that there's like one layer of management to me, and then there's teams. So pretty much all the meetings we run, we pretty much have a flattened, like everyone's invited from the management level.
could you give me an example of something that, like, what do you have to translate into the speak?
Well, we're able to forecast about how much work we can do at like in a 6-month period. So just showing that as a pipeline, which is not very exciting, let's say, for an engineer or a product person, the CFO and the COO really like that. Like, you can get about this much done. Now, is this the stuff you want done or not?
Got it. So taking, yeah, so if an engineer saw that, there'd be a lot of yeah buts and things like that, but you're simplifying things into something that they can wrap their head around.
Yeah.
Aloka, so you're thinking about programs now, so that's sort of an extra step in the scaling journey that you have. What's actually being scaled, do you think, or what's being distributed? How do you think about scale at Pivotal?
Yeah, so I think we've definitely taken the approach of being organic, in that we tend to introduce new ideas or roles because we're identifying a pain point. So I think about 4 years ago, it was a team of 1, and now we're a team of 80. And along the journey, we've introduced different roles that I think encompass parts of product ops. So the first role that got introduced was this idea of a technical program management group. And they were helping with releases and making sure that cross-team dependencies were being managed effectively. And then after that, there was an evolution of a product ops team, but this team was or is responsible for go-to-market and thinking about how can we make it easier for teams to go to market, help them think about pricing, communication, all these sorts of things. Then we eventually hit this pain point of making sure that we started to realize we need to talk to customers more. We at one point abstracted and had a team that was talking to customers that was not product teams. So this was one of the anti-patterns you mentioned earlier. And we decided to dissolve that so that the teams themselves had direct access to customers. But that led to a pain point of how do we make sure that teams can effectively engage with customers and ask the right questions and do good research and build those practices. And that evolved into maybe we need somebody in a role that will help coach and enable teams to do better research. And it evolved into this role called a practice director, which is something that I do, which is working with teams to help coach them and coach frameworks around how do you make good decisions, how do you do good research. And so for us, our journey of scale has really been hitting pain points and going, how do we solve for that pain point? So the most recent step is programs, and that is really hitting that pain point of that messy middle of now we're so large that it isn't enough that leadership has confidence and is kind of providing direction. We need a middle layer that is focused on parts of our product portfolio that can create the strategy for those parts of the product portfolio that can then cascade down to teams. And the pain point we're trying to solve for with programs is to reduce the decision-making time and have clearer direction and confidence, and sort of a steel thread between the strategic intent of the business to what the teams are doing.
What I find is fascinating, I know a bit more about programs at Pivotal through a friend, Evan, who's there in program management there. But what I think is fascinating about Pivotal is that you're being so thoughtful about moving back into programs, because a lot of people, if you've been doing this for a long time, there was always, the program manager, there was a kind of top-down approach to doing program management or project portfolio management or any various things, a lot of governance involved. And so what I find fascinating, it's kind of what's old is new again, but with a new twist, where these are sort of missions that teams are orienting around. And it's just how to get that really light amount of coordination while still keeping the team autonomy. I think that's, in some ways, that's what a lot of program managers wish it could have been when they were being told to execute on this massive program of work, is similar to that thing.
I think there is a downside to that approach, though, in that we're waiting for pain to really surface before we solve for it. Yeah. And usually once you're at the scale that we are, solving for the pain becomes much harder. Yep. So like we are solving for it, but maybe we started later than we should have. And I often reflect on what are the patterns that maybe we should really be looking at outside of Pivotal, on what are the patterns that have worked for scaled organizations, and what is it the right time, or how can we be proactive? Yep. And also adapt to the needs of the organization versus wait for everyone to be really unhappy before, like, okay, now we're gonna.
But I think that relates to the like maybe this, to bring it back to product operations, right? That if you have thoughtful people in wearing those hats or with those titles, etc., they're keeping the temperature of the, like they would help that level of resiliency and help you take these steps at the right time versus kind of waiting too late or doing it too early, right? That would be good. I want to leave time for questions. We have a bunch of questions. There's this poll number 2, which we'll just take, which is a fun one. I don't know. Okay, so in your organization, the product team, so imagine quotes, air quotes around product team, refers to select one of the following: the product management team, cross-functional teams, product management and design, product development, or other. Take a quick shot at this one, and that will bring us into 13 minutes of questions. And we have lots of great questions. And I won't ask Andre to do his version of Jeopardy as we do it. I don't have a joke this time. Last webinar I had some good jokes, but I only tired dad jokes, which are really hard. Interesting. So the product management team in 32%, cross-functional teams in 15%, product management and design 33%, product development. So let's say we lumped product development into cross-functional teams. I'm not sure if that's the right decision, so that might be 28. So it's sort of it's a toss-up if we combine cross-functional teams and product development to what, and Keith brought up a good point when he saw this poll, that both in some cases. There's some environments where you say, well, the product team will think about how they work. They're referring to product management. But if you talk about a team and you say that's a product team, it refers to the team at the same time. So very interesting. Not sure what to do with it. It's kind of a tie. Any thoughts on that quickly before we jump into questions? Keith, at Optimizely, what are the words that you use to describe these crazy posses of people?
We call it ADEPT, a design engineering product team, and that's what we refer to typically as the product team. Only if they're talking about PM specifically and some, like basically something they have to deliver, do they say the product team is going to go visit the customers, or
interesting. So means mostly got it. Buki, at Microsoft, what are the words they use around this, and how does it maybe relate to this product ops discussion too?
It's really funny because when I first started, we just called it engineering teams. And it was like PMs were like on the side, because Microsoft historically has been an engineering focused, engineering centered team, engineering company rather. And so now I've been sort of trying to introduce like product engineering teams to be like, PMs are also part of this product process. And it's been leading into this conversation around like, hey, how do we support engineers in learning more about customers, in being part of this process? We don't necessarily have any good answers to that question. It's just sort of an open question that we're still trying to figure out right now.
Cool. So Microsoft is still trying to figure it out. So if you're having trouble in your environment, words are hard, and this is hard. It doesn't get easier. You just go slightly faster and learn faster. Megan, what are some thoughts? What words do you use at Auto?
Yeah, so product team, but it means both things. It means the product manager, the group of product managers who are reporting to the CPO, and it means the team, the cross-functional team that works on an area of the product. And I actually like that, not because it's all about the product manager, but because it's all about the product, right? The missions and outcomes that those teams are trying to drive are connected to the product and the customer.
Cool. All right, so let's do some rapid fire questions. We'll try to keep answers short, even if we miss out on the depth we're looking for. And we could take this somewhere else and try to answer a bunch of these questions if folks are interested. From Ray, I'm wondering if the panelists can give a specific example of how product ops, how you're defining it in your organization helped product management. Megan.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing huge benefit already having introduced the role at Auth0, primarily in that CDP initiative, that customer development program. So having a sort of a pre-selected, garden of customers that are available to product managers, and also having that layer of coordination to avoiding introducing fatigue with those customers is like huge, right? Because every product manager wants to talk to as many customers as possible, and having like a Rolodex that's pre-populated is going to help us a lot.
Cool. So for Keith, and you could use the Yahoo example, or you could use Optimizely. Can you think of something that you did and the specific pain point that caused the organization to either create your role or create a similar role under this umbrella of product? What was the catalyst?
Probably too many meetings. First thing they threw me into was basically all the meetings that had been created to align everyone. And so my job was to basically represent the whole organization in those meetings. And I would do that by trying to be as simple as possible, by answering yes, no, giving a number, or saying I'll get back to you. So it wasn't the discussions that product managers typically have, it was the operational side. So is this happening or not? Yes or no, when? So it was taking over a lot of the operational communication, and that really saves the PMs to actually do the fun work of customer development.
Yeah, that's a great tip, I think, for everyone on the call. It's like you'll notice these cues and signals, and that's usually a good tip versus trying to solve the problems before they actually happen. Maybe Aloka would say you should have addressed it a little earlier, but at Pivotal, was there some catalyst, Aloka, that said, wow, we really have to pay more attention to this, or think about the program thing, or these sort of cross-cutting customer insights? Was there something that was the trigger?
Yeah, to your earlier point, I think we should be looking for leading indicators and often points or lagging indicators, right? So where did the evolution of programs come from? The root cause in my mind there was we were starting to see that decision making and progress was getting slower because there were so many stakeholders, and it felt like we had to bring everybody into the room to get consensus. We strongly believe in group decision making and making sure that we're inclusive of opinions no matter where they're coming from, right? But that also means that without structure, it leads to 20 people on an email all needing to get an answer and opinion from all of them. So the programs is a way to solve for that. And the thing that we're optimizing for with programs is more autonomy and increased speed and efficiency in decision making, and providing clear direction to teams.
Cool. This one, it's interesting. I guess, Buki, like in your day-to-day work, do you use any specific tool? Like, are tools emerging out of your particular role? Is it tool agnostic? How do the tools you use day in, day out relate to this? Or is that you're just punting on that for now?
I mean, my very cynical answer is I use only Microsoft products all the time. um, I joke and I don't, but I mean, I think it's whatever tools really work for the situation. I don't really have any tools that I'm like, I love this and this is perfect for what I do.
Got it. Megan, for the lifecycle management, are you digging into any particular tools? Or are you building new tools?
Yeah, I mean, I think that tool consistency is important. I'm not gonna do a plug for my favorite product management. Okay, I am ProdPad. We use ProdPad. So we use that for collecting all of our customer feedback and aggregating it, and having a way to connect that to our roadmap, which is awesome. But I think what's most important, regardless of which tool you pick, is to, while I wouldn't want the product operations role to be defined by the tool, I think that they're definitely have a vested interest in having a tool set that is in use across the product organization, so that you actually can get that panopticon view that you want for whichever part of operations the person is focusing on.
Yeah, it's funny that the tool thing is interesting to me at Amplitude, because we're pretty hesitant, although it's easier when you have a single buyer and that buyer exists and you chase them down. That's easier from a company perspective. Our philosophy as a product we don't like tool hoarding, right? So that product is intensely cross-functional as it is. And so we see sometimes the analytics org, there's no necessarily an owner. And so it's always kind of tempting. We're sort of seeing it from the other side, that we'd love, many people at our org would love it to be like, oh, you just call the product ops manager, they're going to buy this stuff. But our product isn't really designed for that, right? It's designed for cross-functional kind of collaboration and things. Yeah, so it's an interesting question for us as we think about it. We don't want Conway's Law and tools to all mash together, which would be not great for the general product public, I don't think. Keith, I was thinking, background in Agile stuff, whatever that means. And we have a number of questions related to, I had one right here. How might this relate to roles like Scrum Masters or project managers, or any host of these other types of roles that you see in your environment? Is it all kind of the same thing, or are there differences, or how do you see them?
I do identify as a Scrum Master, so I could say that my product ops work is as the Scrum Master for the product team, because they have impediments and blockers as well. You want them working on time boxes, and you want them to inspect and adapt regularly. So I do see that. I was a Scrum Master, I was an Agile coach, I was a program manager. So product ops fits right in there. It's just a matter of kind of what teams you're focused on. The product team has a lot more I'm working a lot more with business and sales than when I worked with engineering teams.
Yeah. In some ways, that's that ultimate progression of the Scrum Master role, right? In theory, you're just supposed to trace down the impediments and just keep expanding the boundary. And I would definitely reflect that. I've met, I've a friend at a large company that everyone tries to copy what they do. And I said this product ops thing and say, oh yeah, we've just been doing this under Agile coaching for the last, 8 years. We just never called it that. We were thinking about, how to structure strategy and how we work and things. So I found that interesting. We have a chance for one more question, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. I'm so honored to be doing this with this panel, and the number of questions just shows how interested people are in this. And I'm glad we've got these 2 more panels to go to get through them. Aloka, could you imagine new roles in your company that are gonna emerge because of these shifts that we're sort of putting under this category of product ops?
Yeah, I actually, when I read I think Melissa Perry did some work on product ops and describing the product ops role, and I looked and was like, this is the role we need in our company. And so it definitely resonates a lot and ties together a lot of the pain points that I think I've been feeling that at this point, several different roles are trying to solve for. And so I could absolutely see something like a product ops role evolve for Pivotal, right? As I think one of the things that's starting to shape up in my mind is a lot of what this role is doing is, one, creating flow for teams and leadership, right? What makes it easier for teams to be in flow state?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, how does how does this role help better storytelling for teams and leadership? Because it's a lot about communicating insight, building insights, and telling a good, compelling story.
Yep.
And that becomes more and more critical as I think companies grow. So from my perspective, I could see we're starting to evolve and think about what does it look like to have a program manager for programs. So I could see a role like that playing a product ops role. There is something I think about tool chains and consistency of tool chains, where we've definitely gone with each team gets to decide what tools they want to use, but the downside of that is for external people looking in other departments, they don't have a single view of what is happening with the product org. So I could also see that being something that is important.
Cool. So we've hit the top of the hour. This just shows there's a lot of questions around this. Yeah, so we're going to try to, what we'll try to do is there is the productstack.com. There is a Slack community associated with that. There's a lot of momentum around these questions. So I'll commit at least to jump in there and sort of field some of the questions. I know it's hard to kind of keep your attention with all the Slack communities, but I will be there. I might persuade some of these other folks, they're already in there, so we can answer some of these questions. It's been amazing. Thanks to the sponsor of this, Amplitude, JAMA, Product Plan, and Pivotal. Look out for the email for the next deep dive with Pivotal, Aloka's team, and more folks involved with that. That's going to be super interesting, learn how one company does it. And then actually Melissa Perry will be joining me for the final one about how to get started. That's in November. This will be recorded so you can share it with folks internally in your company. Buki, Megan, Keith, Aloka, really honored to know you all and for you to come and be panelists. And yeah, we'll keep the discussion going at some point.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.